I just recently got this beautiful Oculus Quest over here, and I'm going to use it to make my own game. The first video I have on this channel is how to make a VR game in 2021, and it's using the Oculus Rift S, which a decent amount of people have, but I just recently got the Quest 2, and the setup for that is a little bit different, so I'm going to remake that video and show you guys how to set up to develop with the Oculus Quest 2. Let's go. First thing we need to do is download Unity if you don't have that installed already. You can just type in Unity download into Google and this first link will get you there. We're going to download Unity Hub and then choose the version from that. When it first comes up, you'll be greeted with this little setup window right here. We'll go down to the installs, and if you don't have an install already, we're going to click add and then choose the latest long-term support version. And that is the recommended version that you can grab. You can go newer if you want, but these are still being developed on, so my recommendation is always to go with the latest long-term support version. So for this, I'm using 2020.3.5. Keep in mind you can have multiple versions downloaded at the same time, so you can swap back and forth. So I'm just going to download the 2021 version, go hit next, and then if you're using the Oculus Quest 2, you need to make sure you have Android build support checked. Because the Oculus Quest 2 is inherently an Android device, if you want to build games to it and actually run games on the Quest 2, you'll have to have Android build support checked. Make sure you agree to the terms and conditions, hit continue, approve it on your computer, and let that run for forever. Once your version is installed, it'll look like this one over here, and if you have the Android build support, that'll show up in the little Android thing down here. So if we want to start a new project, we're going to go over to projects. You can click on new here, or if you have multiple versions, you can click this drop down arrow and select which version you want to create a new project for. From here, you can choose any number of templates. There's even a VR template, but I've found that it works better when I just start with a from scratch universal render pipeline or 3D template and then build up from there. I found that the VR template doesn't actually get you to the place I'm trying to go as far as using OpenXR and that kind of stuff. So universal render pipeline is my go-to because it comes pre-built with a little bit of a scene and the lighting pipeline is a little bit better. I'm just going to rename this to like Quest 2 and then create. While that's spinning up, let's open up the Oculus app on the PC, go over into settings and then click on general and make sure unknown sources is true over here. And then we're going to go to devices, and if you have multiple devices, you'll need to make sure that your Quest 2 is the active device. So make sure to turn it on, and you'll see here that it is now the active device, but if you wanted to swap it over to active, you click on it and then click this button that says set as active. And then we're going to put the Quest 2 in developer mode. So to do that, you're going to need to go to the app. So with your phone or iPad or something, open up the Oculus app, go over to settings, make sure you select the Quest 2, connect to that, and then click on more settings and then developer mode and make sure developer mode is selected. This lets you add unverified apps onto the Quest 2, so all of our development can be added and built onto the Quest 2 without Facebook's permission. Now we can jump back into Unity and see that we have our new universal render pipeline project. First thing we need to do is go into edit and then project settings, and then inside of settings we're going to go up to package manager and check this box that says enable preview packages and then check that I understand. This lets you download packages that are still in preview and not pushed out to the 1.0 version. Exit out of that. Now we're going to go up to window and package manager. Right up here at the top next to this plus icon, we're going to click on packages in project and change it to packages Unity registry. And then scroll kind of to the middle-ish and find OpenXR plugin and click install. The OpenXR plugin is the platform that allows you to create a project, have one input system, and it will work on any device. So it'll work on Oculus devices, Valve, Vive, any other VR hardware devices. You're going to get this pop-up that says, do you want to restart? And it's going to swap your input system from the old device-based legacy system over to the new input system. So we're going to say yes, your project is going to restart. If you haven't saved, it'll prompt you to save, and then the project will shut back down and open back up. And then still in the package manager, we're going to scroll all the way to the bottom and find the XR Interaction Toolkit. This one at the moment is still in preview, so that's why you need to enable preview packages so you can actually see this part. We're going to install this, and this comes with a lot of pre-built input actions and locomotion and that kind of thing to move the player around, and a lot of scripts that we don't have to write ourselves. We're also going to expand samples and import the default input actions. This will set us up with all the controls we need to set out with instead of actually writing them all ourselves. And then one more thing, let's go back into Edit Project Settings, and we want to go all the way down to XR Plugin Management. So now that you have the Android platform installed, you'll see there's an Android tab and there's a PC tab. So just like all the other tutorials, we're going to check OpenXR for the PC tab, click on the exclamation point, check Fix All, and go into Features and check Oculus Touch Controller Profile, still in the PC tab. Then we're going to go back to XR Plugin Management, go over to the Android tab, and check on the Oculus. I've tried this with the OpenXR plugin, but the issue I keep running into is when I try to build in the headset, it comes up as a flat screen, almost like I'm watching a movie, instead of actually putting me inside of the project. So in order to actually test out the project and build to the Quest 2, you're going to want to use the Oculus plugin instead of OpenXR. And by checking this Oculus plugin, it will automatically install that plugin, and you'll get this other option down here for Oculus where you can adjust these settings. So just make sure your target devices, the Quest 2, is checked. Let's exit out of this and go back into the scene and start to set up our XR rig. So the default Universal Render Pipeline project comes with this little construction scene. I always think that the gizmo icons are way too big, so I'm going to scale those down. So before we add this XR rig, we're going to add the default input presets. Those are going to be located in Samples, XR Interaction Toolkit, whatever version that you downloaded, and default input actions. So click on each one of these presets, and then up here at the top in the inspector, just click Add to Action-Based Controller. And this will automatically populate the correct controls for doing locomotion, snap turn, teleporting, all that kind of stuff. If we double click on this XRI default input actions, you'll see that it's pre-populated with all of these different actions. So with these added, it will automatically track your position, rotation, the select, which is your grip button, activate, which is your trigger button, UI pressed, and all these different actions here. So we don't have to go through and set these up manually. You could if you wanted to. You could add by pressing this plus sign up here and add a new action with your specific controls by going into the binding and going down to XR controller and selecting your specific controller and what buttons you want there. So that's how you add a new action, but we're just going to use the default ones for this. If you're interested in a little more detail about this kind of stuff, I have a whole nother tutorial specifically about how to use Unity's new input action toolkit. So if you're interested in more information about that, I'll link it up here at the top. After we've added all these presets, there's one more thing we have to do in the settings. We're going to go to Edit, Project Settings, and then find Preset Manager, and you'll now see that this action-based controller will have two presets, one for the right controller and one for the left controller, and then you'll also see the continuous move, turn, and snap turn. So these are all the presets that we added. We need to differentiate the right and left controllers. So in order to do that, we're going to write right and left inside of this filter column, and that will help Unity understand which one goes where. I don't know why it can't just get it from the preset name, but this is how it wants to do it. So let's add our XR rig. We're going to right click over here in the hierarchy, go down to XR, and then click on the room scale XR rig, action based. If you've moved your camera in the scene at all, it will probably show up weird and not in the right spot. You can see it's down there in the corner. So I'm going to go up to transform, right click, and click on reset, and that'll put it back in the center of the scene, and then I can reposition it wherever I want. So this box is going to represent where the room space is, not necessarily where the character is. Essentially where the player is going to be able to walk around inside of their room. So if you're building a room scale game where the player doesn't actually move, all they have to do is walk around in the room, you'll want to confine all the things that can be interacted with inside of this box. And by the way, if you don't want to set up all of this and run through the build settings that we're about to set up and do all of these things, then you can just download this project. If you want to support me on Patreon, I'll link that down in the description. And you can just download the project and be set up to run on Quest 2. I really appreciate all the current Patreons. They're the whole reason that I have this new Quest 2. So thank you guys so much. And let's set up the build settings and finish this out. We want to add one component to the XR rig to be able to operate it. Click on Add Component and type in Input Action Manager. Add that one. And then under this Action Assets, there isn't going to be anything in there right now. Click on this XRI Default Input Actions and drag it over, and that'll put that as has the element in there, and now you should be able to control the XR rig. So there's two ways you can run your project in the Quest 2. One of them is exactly like using the Rift S or any other linked headset to your PC. All you have to do is hit this play button up here and make sure your Quest 2 is in linked mode. So you'll need to click on settings, go over to the quick actions menu, and then click on the enable Oculus link, and that will set you up so whenever you hit play in Unity, it will automatically run that project on the Quest 2 without having to run a build or do any of that. That's the fastest and probably the most recommended way I would suggest. The other way you can test your project on the Quest 2 is by doing a build and actually putting it on the Quest 2, and this will enable you to run your project unlinked, untethered, but it does require building your level every single time you want to test, which is a little more time intensive, but ultimately may give you better testing results. So it's kind of a pro and con. Do you want to test it fast or do you want to test it well kind of thing? In order to do that, we're going to mess with the build settings. So go over to File, Build Settings, and then we want to add open scenes. So whatever scene you want to test, make sure it's up here in this scenes to build, and then you can check and uncheck the ones you want, and then click on this Android here, and if it's not downloaded like we talked about at the beginning, you'll have an option to download the Android build support, and if it is downloaded, it should look like this. All we have to do is go down here and click on Switch Platform. This may take a minute. It's going to go through all of your configuration settings and swap them over from PC or Mac to Android. There we go. We have an option to build or build and run down here at the bottom. First, we're going to click this default device and swap it over to the Quest 2 because that's what we want to build on. And then in order to build it and push it over to the Quest 2, you're going to want to make sure your Quest 2 is on and connected via a link cable, and then you want to click on build and run. It's going to prompt you to write a name for your project, so I'm just going to call this one Test Quest 2. And then if this is your first time doing a build, it's going to take a minute, so it hasn't pre-built all of the lighting settings or anything, so depending on how big your level is, it's going to take several minutes. But then your subsequent builds are going to be a whole lot faster because it'll cache all of that information from the first build. The reason I checked build and run instead of build is because build and run will actually build it and then put it on the Quest 2. If you just click build, it's going to create a file, but it's not going to put it onto the Quest 2 and it's not going to run it. So you would have to do that manually. So just clicking build and run skips some of those steps and makes it easier. And there we go. Now I'm going to pull up the Quest and run the project. So all I did was put the headset on and it asked me to turn on my controllers. So I hit continue and it threw me into the app. And now everything is working just as expected. The lasers are tracking to my controllers and I can move my head around in 3D space. Now in order to exit the app, all we have to do is press the home button on the right controller, the Oculus button, just hold that down, and then we have the option to quit, and that'll take us back home. And if I want to get back into that build without having to run another build, all I have to do is press on the Oculus button. We're going to go over to apps, click the all drop down, and then scroll all the way down to the bottom of unknown sources, and then all of the builds that you put on are going to be in here, unknown sources. And having the Quest in developer mode allows me to have access to this folder here. So this one was called Quest 2. So if I want to rerun that, all I have to do is click on it and that'll drop me back into the project. Get a nice little made with Unity sign, and here we are. And just for good measure, I'm going to test running the Quest in play mode. So if we go over to Unity, first we need to put the Quest into link mode. So I'm going to click on settings, go to quick actions menu, and then click on the Oculus link button, and that'll put me over into link mode. Oh, it's saying my PC got disconnected, so I'm just going to unplug my cable and replug that back in. It's going to ask me to allow access, and then Oculus link is available in settings, so I'm going to go over here, quick actions menu, and then Oculus link. That puts me over into link mode, and now I can go to Unity and just hit this play button here, and it should run the app over in the Quest. It lost tracking on my controllers for a second, so I had to just click on the buttons, and now it's tracking everything, and I can move my head around and move the controllers around, and everything works. And from here I could debug inside of Unity, so I could use Unity and go over into scene mode and debug everything that's happening. Whereas if I actually build and run it in the headset, I can't see what's happening over in in Unity. So if you're debugging or just, doing major game development, I would highly recommend using a link cable and just running it as if it was a Rift S or a plugged in device. There you go. Now you can develop games using your Oculus Quest 2, and I look forward to seeing what you make. If you make something cool, definitely add a comment and tag me in it, or join the Discord and you can show off in one of our channels. If you have any questions, or if I didn't cover anything quite to your liking, definitely add a comment. I reply to every single comment in the comment section, so let's chat, and until next week.